The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
One day, as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross over to the further shore of the lake." Leaving the crowd, they took him away in the boat in which he was sitting, while the other boats accompanied him. It happened that a bad storm blew up. The waves were breaking over the boat, and it began to ship water badly. Jesus was in the stern through it all, sound asleep on a cushion. They finally woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, doesn't it matter to you that we're going to drown?" He awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." The wind fell off and everything grew calm. Then he said to them, "Why are you so terrified? Why are you lacking in faith?" A great awe overcame them at this. They kept saying to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The gospel inspired by God.
Thanks be to God.
The FMBR has been in existence for about 30 years. It's called the Foundation for Mind-Being Research. And there's a group of scientists in the Bay Area who get together regularly, and other people are welcome to attend their lectures as well. And once a month, on the fourth Friday of each month, they bring in a visiting speaker, a scientist who is also interested in spiritual stuff. So their interest is in bringing together science and spirituality. And they've brought in some really interesting speakers over the years. And they send out a newsletter, and I'm on their mailing list, and occasionally I'll attend some of the lectures. But I haven't been attending for about 3 years because I tend to work very late on Friday nights. But the last one I got from them mentioned that the speaker was going to be a guy called Bernard Haisch. And I'm fascinated by this guy's writings. I've spoken about him a few times before here. He's an astrophysicist, worked many years with NASA, a man about my own age. And he started off actually in a seminary. He wanted to be a Catholic priest, but he left after a few years. He never finished, and he went into astrophysics instead. And a very interesting character. And he's written a few books, one of them called The God Theory. So he was the speaker last Friday night. So I decided I was going to miss dinner and go to attend the lecture. So I went there on Friday night, and he gave a lecture. And he's a guy I mentioned before who came up with the theory of creation by subtraction. That fascinated me. And creation by subtraction is the belief system that by limiting infinite possibilities, we create finite realities. By limiting infinite possibilities, we create finite realities. He believes that that's how actually creation happens. I'll give you an example. If you go into a movie theater and there's a projectionist box up at the back and there's a beam of white light beaming down to the front. The white light, you can't distinguish anything in white light. It's impossible to see anything in white light. In order to create images, you have to begin to obstruct the white light. You have to put a roll of film in front of it that selectively obstructs various parts of the light, and that creates images on the screen. And so it's by limiting infinite possibility, you create finite reality. You can only begin to see images by actually limiting the light. And his belief system was that in a sense is how creation happens. That the light, the ultimate light, which is God, has to be limited in some senses. You have to occlude parts of it in order to get the images of manifest creation. So I've been fascinated by his stuff. And the funny thing was, in the week after I got the mailing, I came across his name in 3 different books that I was reading. So I figured out that's a sign. I got to attend this lecture on Friday night. So I decided I'm going to skip dinner and go straight from work to the meeting. And I went there, and it was really fascinating. And I want to use that as my jumping off point tonight, because he mentioned something else in the course of the lecture that sparked a whole line of thinking on my part. And I gave a little homily yesterday morning for the Saturday morning Mass, and a few people afterwards said to me, expand on that, talk about that tomorrow and expand on it a little bit. So I decided I'd do that today. So I'm going to make 3 main points today. I'm going to talk about typing civilizations. That's the first point I'll make. Secondly, I will talk about Jesus Christ. Was he an avatar, an extraterrestrial, or the only Son of God. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about Project Earth. So they're the 3 points I'll make this morning. So the first one, typing civilizations. Now, the current estimate actually of the world, of the universe, is that we used to think it was 13.7 billion years of age. The most modern computations estimate that it's actually 15 billion years of age. But it's certainly a lot older than planet Earth. Planet Earth is about 4.6 billion years of age. And so obviously there are parts of the universe which are at least 10 billion years older than planet Earth. So very, very obviously, life got started in these places a long, long, long time before life got started here. So is there intelligent life out there? There's a professor emeritus in Santa Cruz called Francis Drake, and in the 1950s he came up with what is perhaps the second most important formula of the 20th century. It's an estimate of the number of civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy that have developed technology capable of communicating outside of their own solar system. And the formula very simply says that the number of those civilizations is equal to n star multiplied by fp multiplied by fe multiplied by fl multiplied by fi multiplied by fc multiplied by l. And the factors in that equation mean the following. Okay, you got it, Lee? Good, Georgie. N star stands for the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, which is something in the region of 200 billion. FP represents the fraction of those of star systems that have planets in attendance. FE represents the number of those, or the fraction of those planets that are Earth-like. In other words, they're rocky and have temperate kinds of climates. FL represents the fraction of those that have thrown up life. FI represents the fraction that have thrown up intelligent life. And FC represents the fraction that have thrown up intelligent life capable of communicating outside their own planetary system. And L represents the longevity of such a civilization. Because any civilization that develops that technology runs the risk of destroying itself. And so his formula, there's his formula. Now, there are various ways of plugging the data into that formula. But a very conservative estimate of the number of such civilizations just in the Milky Way galaxy, and remember that there are about 150 billion galaxies, so that's just one galaxy, a very conservative estimate of the number of such civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy is 10,000. So a very conservative estimate is that there are about 10,000 civilizations just in this one galaxy which are more advanced than we are. You take that notion. Now, a Russian scientist ran with that, and this is where Bernard Haisch, this is what he mentioned on Friday night that set me thinking. He said there's a Russian scientist who claims that he can divide those civilizations into 3 types. Type 1 civilizations are those civilizations that have learned mastery over their own planet. So all those civilizations who have learned how to control the climate on their planet, how to control their oceans and their volcanoes, and who have learned how to harness the energy of their own planet to meet their own needs. That would be a type 1 civilization. A type 2 civilization would be a civilization that has learned to harness its own star. It's not depending on its planet for the resources. It's not just harnessing its own planet and depleting those. It's harnessing its own star. And it's using the energy of its own star, solar flares and stuff like that, in order to meet its energy needs. And a type 3 civilization, according to this Russian scientist, would be a civilization which is not just harnessing the energy of its own star, but is actually harnessing the energy of its own galaxy. It's drawing its energy from an entire galaxy. Now, obviously, such a civilization is much, much, much more advanced than we. Where do humans rank on that scale? We're a type 0, literally. We live on a planet that we can't control, and we're trying to harness it, not particularly successfully. Now, I think what's happening, I believe personally that we're a civilization and we're a species which is trying to make the movement from being a type 0 to a type 1 civilization. But so far, we're doing a really, really poor job of it. We're managing to deplete the planet, possibly to destroy it. We're wiping out a whole bunch of life forms, and we run the danger, actually, of destroying ourselves. So all of the people who talk about this theory believe that the transition from type 0 to type 1 is the most difficult and the most dangerous of all the shifts. It is much easier and far less dangerous to go from a type 1 civilization to a type 2, or from a type 2 civilization to a type 3. The most dangerous transition of all is the transition from type 0 into type 1. And we're in the brink of that at the moment. And so we're either going to make it and become a type 1 civilization where we have mastery of a planet and we can control our resources and control our climate, or we're going to destroy ourselves in the process. So there's my first point. There's the typing of various kinds of civilizations. Second point then, when we think then about Jesus Christ, is Jesus Christ an avatar? Is he an extraterrestrial? Or is he God's only son? You've known me long enough to realize that I do not believe that Jesus Christ is God's only son. I've said to you again and again and again that I believe that everything that lives is a word of God made flesh. That God did not have an only son. That Jesus is not in this kind of special relationship, but that the difference between Jesus and the rest of us is that Jesus is a fully realized emanation from source, whereas the rest of us are asleep at the wheel. And so I don't believe that Jesus is the only Son of God. So is he an avatar? Yes, for me he's an avatar. Is he an extraterrestrial? Very possibly. So is Jesus Christ, a denizen from a type 1 civilization, a type 2 civilization, or a type 3 civilization? So I specifically chose the reading today because it speaks to me that he at least had mastered type 1 civilization. Type 1 civilization are those who can manage their own climate. They have charge of their oceans, the wind, volcanoes, all these kinds of things. So here's the great story about Jesus today. He's crossing the lake. He's been preaching all day long. He's fast asleep in the stern of the boat, lying on a pillow. And this extraordinary storm breaks up, and they're shipping water, and they're in danger of drowning. And he's fast asleep. And they're scared. And they wake him up and they say, "Isn't it of concern to you that we're drowning?" And he stands up in the boat, extends his hands out over the ocean, and says, "Peace, be still." And the waves subside, and the wind dies down. Now, is this just a fancy story somebody made up in order to kind of promote the cause of Jesus? Or is it an indication of the fact that Jesus is at least from a type 1 civilization? That he comes from a civilization in which they have total control over their climate and their environment. Now maybe he's even beyond that. Maybe he's a type 2 or a type 3. Or maybe even, if I were to make a new classification, maybe he's a type 4. That a type 4 civilization would be a civilization that has learned to control its entire universe, not just its galaxy, but its entire universe. And so is Jesus Christ, is he just an avatar, and whatever avatar means for you? Or is he, in fact, is he some kind of an extraterrestrial from an advanced civilization, which is type 1, type 2, type 3, or type 4? I want to just mention two things about him. I want to mention Eucharist, and I want to mention resurrection. So all of these stories you hear about Jesus, healing people or raising people from the dead, are they just kind of mishigas? Are they just kind of made up mythology? Or is there some power and some meaning to them? Now suppose Jesus were a type 1, a type 2, a type 3, or a type 4 citizen of such a civilization. He would have mastery over not just the climate, he would have mastery over physical manifestation or demanifestation, and he would have obviously control over even time. So I'm going to just take a few incidents from his life. So when Jesus talked about Eucharist, for instance, when he instituted Eucharist, and he said, "Take this, this is my body. Every time you eat of this, you're eating of my flesh and drinking of my blood." So what was he doing? Was Jesus Christ giving us actually a piece of bread and saying, this is my big toes in there someplace, and my kidney is there someplace, if you chomp down on it, you'll find it? Is he talking about that? Or is he saying in some senses that he's mastery of space and time, and that he's of such an advanced intelligence that he can literally bring himself into manifestation, he can demanifest and remanifest as well? Now that's not so extraordinary. You did it yourself. You took 9 months to do it, but you did it. You went from 0 to a full human being in 9 months. Now, is it possible that a more advanced civilization could accelerate that process? We used to think, for instance, that you can't travel faster than the speed of light.